Taiwan. I'm Ethan Liu with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Technology publication The Information says the U.S. is investigating whether TSMC produced advanced chips for China's Huawei, a move that would breach U.S. export rules. TSMC has responded to say it's a law-abiding company and we're committed to complying with all applicable rules and regulations, including applicable export controls. We maintain a robust and comprehensive export system for monitoring and ensuring compliance. The U.S. Commerce Department has not confirmed that it's investigating the Taiwanese chipmaker. The information reported that investigators are looking into whether Huawei bought chips from TSMC indirectly. To learn more about the implications of this, Alec McDonald spoke to analyst Bob O'Donnell from Technalysis Research in Silicon Valley.
The U.S. has reportedly opened an investigation into TSMC for violating export regulations and Know Your Customer regulations by supplying Huawei with AI and smartphone chips. And this also just comes one day after the government announced additional steps to stemming the wave of third-party companies supplying Huawei with these kinds of chips. Can you speak to how big of a problem this is?
Well, the supply chain in the tech industry, Alec, is very, very complicated. It always has been, and it's just getting more so over time. As devices get more sophisticated, they include more components in them. It becomes a huge issue to track all of this down. So, I think the initial efforts by the U.S. Commerce Department were focused on trying to prevent companies who purchase chips from TSMC. Because the idea is, the U.S. is concerned, of course, that oftentimes these more advanced chips do end up in military systems as well. And that's what's triggered a lot of this. And so that's why we saw that initial pressure. Now, this takes it even further, as you said, because if TSMC is somehow directly supplying those chips to some of these smaller companies in the supply chain, obviously that's another big issue. And it points to how complicated all of this is today and how difficult it is to keep track of where all these components are going.
So with that in mind, can you speak a little bit to how difficult it is for companies like TSMC to monitor their supply chains?
Well, you would obviously, everybody would think that they would know who their customers are, but it wouldn't be the first time in the world that we've seen, whether it's in the tech industry or other places, where some company was misrepresenting who they actually were. And it could be that that's the case. And somehow, TSMC was not aware that this is who these companies were and where, in fact, those chips were eventually going. And one thing I will say is over the last couple of years, because of all the concerns about this, actually quite a few of the big computer system manufacturers, companies like Dell and HP and Lenovo and others like that, and I believe Apple as well, they actually have systems in place to now track this because they want to ensure that nothing has been inserted into their devices along the way.
So this also comes just one day after TSMC posted their highest ever quarterly revenue returns. Can you speak a little bit about how big of news this would be for TSMC and then the potential implications and consequences for the wider semiconductor and tech industries at large?
The bottom line is TSMC reports where their chips go in terms of regions, and China is still much smaller than the US. So it would be, in terms of the impact, to TSMC directly, it might be modest. It's more of a political issue in terms of what they're going to have to do to avoid these kind of concerns being raised in the future. Look, the reality is TSMC is sort of in the commanding position right now because all the most advanced, well, not all, the vast majority of the most advanced chips in the world are coming from TSMC. So companies in the U.S. are utterly dependent upon them. I think it's certainly going to raise some red flags, especially when you've got the U.S. government giving funding and incentives to TSMC to, for example, build a factory in Arizona. So it's a very sticky problem if it turns out, there's some things going on here. But my guess is, TSMC has had a pretty good record of trying to keep clean and away from politically driven issues. It may simply be a case where some of these companies, again, misrepresented themselves, to TSMC, and now it's being discovered and actions will be taken right away.
There was Bob O'Donnell, chief analyst at Technalysis Research in Silicon Valley. China's economy grew 4.6% in the last 3 months, the slowest since early 2023. While the figure slightly beat forecasts, it was slower than the previous quarter. The world's second largest economy is struggling with a declining property sector and slowing export growth. Policymakers last month unveiled monetary support measures in a bid to boost the economy as Beijing tries to hit its target of 5% GDP growth, but they've left further details of planned stimulus vague. Chinese President Xi Jinping will travel to Russia next week and will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Xi will attend the summit meeting of the BRICS group of nations, which has added new members this year. It will be Xi's second visit to Russia since the country invaded Ukraine in 2022. Putin also made a state visit to China earlier this year. Environmentalists say the volume of plastic waste in Taiwan has grown far beyond expectations. As other countries work out a global plastic treaty, they want Taiwan to get reducing and reusing. John Van Triest has the story.
Taiwan's battle against plastic waste doesn't look like it's going well. While the cabinet drew up a strategy to tackle the issue way back in 2003, environmentalists say the volume of waste has exploded, even just in the past decade.
就发现说我们的废弃物并没有减少。那台湾的废弃物产量从2014年的2800多万吨上升到2023年的3300多万吨，那这远远超过了当初政府所定的目标。
The groups represented here have a few ideas about why this has happened.
作为贸易大战，所以有很多台商回流嘛，直接导致我们的制造业增加，然后事业废弃物增加。后来的新冠疫情带来短暂效应。
Much of this plastic is burnt rather than reused or recycled, and the government is planning to increase the capacity of incinerators, which currently can't keep up with the amount of waste being produced. Today, these groups are gathered to release a report they drew up with international help on this problem.
很多都是拿去当燃料烧掉。那在欧盟，就是我们废弃物处理方式的优先顺序，应该是源头减量优先，再使用、再利用。但是它的再利用包括能源回收。
In just a few weeks, diplomats from around the world will gather in South Korea for a last round of talks on a global plastic treaty. Though Taiwan is often sidelined in global affairs, these environmentalists say it's time the country steps up its fight to cut down waste from the source. Alex Chen and John Van Triest for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan could lose a full third of its population by 2070, dropping from 23 down to 15 million people. A recent government projection shows that by then there could be 1.7 million fewer people aged 0 to 14 living in Taiwan. The population aged 15 to 64 is also expected to shrink by 9.2 million, while the number of people aged 65 and over will jump 2.8 million. During the same period, the ratio of working-aged people to elderly people will drop from 3.6 to 1 to 1 to 1. The government says there are still options available to explore.
少子化的对策，可以多加努力，也以扩大人工生殖的补助对象，或者是延长育婴留职停薪津贴这样。
Taiwan is on track to be a super-aged society by 2025, meaning a fifth of its people will be 65 and older. A major climate conference is bringing together government and industry leaders from around Taiwan for the global fight against climate change. Wesley Lewis went to Taichung to find out how they plan to get the country's climate goals on track.
Excluded from UN-organized environmental events, Taiwan has set out to create a version of its own, the Taiwan Climate Action Expo. In its 4th year, it's already become one of the country's biggest summits on ecology. And this year, the National Museum of Natural Science here in Taichung is hosting. This summit is being held just 1 month ahead of the UN's Climate Change Conference in Azerbaijan, also known as the Conference of Parties, or COP. With Taiwan barred from attending due to diplomatic pressure from Beijing, this expo has been billed Taiwan's version of COP. And government ministers here at the conference say the country has a lot of expertise to offer.
那这个台湾的 COP 只是我们的一个期望，我们希望说未来或许去参加国际 COP 的人可能先来台湾， 他看到台湾的这些 Cup 的这些努力跟实践，我们或许可以对国际的这些讨论提供我们的解方。
The event is bringing together top government officials and business leaders from a wide range of industries. Organizers say they're trying to engage key players in different fields to create and implement Taiwan's national climate policy.
For industry or business leaders, they are very, very important to driving the economy forward, but also heavy players to provide maybe carbon emissions. So for their engagement, they can find solutions here.
The summit's attendees showcased cutting-edge technology and research in areas like electric vehicles, recycling, carbon capture, and water treatment, expertise that Taiwan can use to reach its climate goals. The country continues to aim for net zero emissions by 2050, but over 80% of the country's energy still comes from fossil fuels, and the country's growing multi-billion-dollar tech and manufacturing sectors continue to threaten the environment and deplete natural resources like fresh water. Taiwan may not be able to take part in next month's COP in Azerbaijan, but no one is stopping it from holding its own and to find ways to help contribute to the global effort, starting first at home. Kamashu and Wesley Lewis in Taichung for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's biggest fashion event has kicked off in Taipei. Our reporter Cindy Chi was there for the opening.
A mix of cutesy art and high fashion graced the runway on the opening night of Taipei Fashion Week, the country's biggest fashion event. The show features designs from pairings of 6 fashion designers and 6 professional digital illustrators. It's a groundbreaking collaboration, marking the first time these two worlds have merged in Taiwan. Bringing this collaboration to life wasn't easy. For Berlin-based Taiwanese streetwork designer #Demore, blending their edgy catalog with colorful illustrated creations posed a unique challenge.
In the beginning, for our team, we think, well, oh my God, this IP is just way too cute, and we are like a very, edgy and very cool, very Berlin style. But I think this is always the fun part, I think the cooperation is always about looking for the spark, looking for a conversation, looking for the conflict. In order to have a conflict, then we can actually transfer something new.
因为这是我第一次跟时装做合作，所以觉得非常有趣。因为我本身也很喜欢设计服装这一块，就很开心，就是没有想到自己的作品可以用这种方式呈现。
This collaboration aims to make high fashion more accessible to young people by combining colorful characters with modern looks. The end result seems to have impressed audiences.
What I was getting was, it was really out of the box and super creative. And there are a few pieces that I did not expect it. Like, I did not expect it would look like that. And it actually looks good on, just wear it like that. And then it was really fun.
It's a little bit controversial to the eyes because you're not used to it. And makes everything so lively. It's kind of weird, but in a good way. It's like quirky.
In addition to the designs on the runway, a special guest stole the spotlight on opening night. Olympic gold medalist Ling Yuting. This year, Taipei Fashion Week invited the boxer to kick off the show, symbolizing strength and grace.
这一次能够以就是非常台湾特色的方式、风格、文化，可以去展现出台湾的文化跟力量的一种拍摄模式，我觉得是非常新鲜的体验。我觉得能够用这样的方式去介绍台湾，哇，我是相当的与有荣焉。
Though the opening event only lasted for a few hours, Taipei Fashion Week will continue until the end of October, offering creativity, culture, and innovation alongside the latest fashion trends. Devon Tai and Sunny Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching today's What's Up Taiwan. Before we go, this year's supermoon dazzled the globe on Thursday, and here are some of the most impressive shots. I'm Ethan Liu. Take care, and I'll see you next time.